Hello, friends. This is the big one. This is subject matter that I've known from the start I wanted to do. The challenge is going to be in the doing of it, what to cover, how to present it, what to omit. I am covering well-trodden territory. Many folks have tackled this material before me, and in greater depth than I have any desire or ability to. So, what are we doing here? Well, I'd like to approach this through the lens of my personal history with the material. I'd like to summarize the history of all the twists and turns this whole thing took on its storied journey to even end up existing at all. I'd like to explore some of the peripheral and associated material that I've personally enjoyed. I'd like to perhaps pique your curiosity about a thing which you may have never experienced in the first place, or maybe not in a long time. And if you have a less than favorable view of it, or no real opinion at all, perhaps learning more about it will compel you to give it a chance, or a second chance, or a last chance. And hopefully you'll be glad you did. And I'd like to end up doing things that I didn't know I would do at the outset, which is part of what makes this fun for me. Sounds lofty. It is. And due to that, this will most certainly be a multi-part episode. A multi-sode. Yeah, there is just no way around it. If nothing else, I'll do a follow-up episode talking about some of the associated stuff I mentioned, like books and video games. And ideally, I'd like to get other people in here to talk about it as well. We'll see. I need to eat this elephant one bite at a time, or else it will stay forever in my head as something I really want to do, but have no idea how to approach. An inexhaustible font of negative self-talk. Delicious. As I write this, I'm just starting for the sake of starting, because sometimes that's what you have to do. So, let's start. Ladies and gentlefolk, I want to talk about Alien 3. I'm curious as to what your immediate response is to hearing that. Please leave a comment. Alien 3 is a motion picture that was released in the United States movie theaters on May 22nd, 1992. It was directed by David Fincher. It was written by, well, a number of people. It stars, most of all, Sigourney Weaver, with Charles Dutton and Charles Dance playing prominent roles. As the title suggests, this movie is the third entry in the Alien franchise. The first movie, Alien, came out in 1979, followed by Aliens in 1986. Aliens, as a sequel, was very successful. It's considered by many to be one of the best sci-fi action movies of all time, and it is without a doubt an example of a very good sequel. However, many confused folks incorrectly believe it to be superior to the original. Unfortunate. Aliens made the studio boatloads of cash. It was one of the highest grossing films of the year. Regardless of where any fan of the franchise would rank it against the other films, nobody can dispute that its cultural and historical impact was massive. Suffice it to say, there were big shoes to fill for Alien 3. Regardless of where any fan of the franchise would rank Alien 3 against the other films, nobody can dispute that it was hardly the movie that many, if not most people, expected or wanted it to be. That is not to say that it didn't do just fine at the box office. And that is not to say that it was universally panned by critics upon release. 1992 was well before the internet as we now know it, so there was no real platform for real people to express what they thought at the time. I consider the first three movies to be the heart, the core of the Alien franchise. They are the essential watching. Everything that followed sucked. No, just kidding. But truly, most viewers can and did stop there. What do people generally seem to think now? IMDb ratings are on a 1 to 10 scale. The IMDb averages for the first 3 movies are 8.5, 8.4, and 6.4. The first 2 movies are virtually identical in score, but Alien 3 lags clearly behind. Rotten Tomatoes provides ratings based on more formal critical reviews, as well as what they call audience reviews, which is people that use the site. Both are expressed as a percentage. Alien has 93% critic and 94% audience score. Aliens has 94% in both categories. Alien 3 has 44% critic and 46% audience. Ouch. Lastly, Metacritic is a site that aggregates reviews and produces a composite score out of 100. The 3 movies in order receive an 89, an 84, and 59. You can't see it, but I am wincing. So what's the deal? Is this movie bad? Why am I even talking about it? Am I just pretending to like a thing that I know is bad so I can seem like I have an edgy opinion? If that were the case, I think I would lose steam before I got through everything that I'm going to have to get through to actually make these episodes a reality. I was 12 years old when this movie came out. I didn't see it in theaters. I'm pretty sure the first Alien movie that I saw in a theater was much later. It was called Alien Covenant. And that is the last time you'll hear me mention that movie. Ever. I was most certainly already a fan of Aliens by this time. I grew up with that movie. The version of it we had growing up was one that we taped off television in March of 1989. I watched that tape over and over again. Because I liked it so much, I wanted to see the original, which we rented. But the younger me didn't find it nearly as good as its sequel. It was plenty scary and suspenseful, but as a young one, I didn't really like those feelings. I wanted the 2 hours of continuous gunfire and explosions that Aliens delivered. None of this less is more crap. More was more. At some point, I'm pretty sure I was around 15 years old. I was definitely in high school. I rented and watched Alien 3 for the first time. And from what I remember, I didn't really like it. It was slow, dark, drab. There were a ton of characters that all looked more or less the same, and they said the F word constantly. Fuck! I didn't at that point in my life talk that way, like I kinda do now. With that one viewing, I more or less wrote it off and got on with my life. Some years later, I eventually saw the movie that followed it, Alien Resurrection, because I was a fan of its director. That movie is certainly not a fan favorite either, but I liked it a lot. I thought that it brought some great ideas to the screen, and it had such a good cast that many of the shortcomings, numerous shortcomings, were forgivable. By then, I'd seen the first movie several more times. I was a big fan of it and of Blade Runner by the same director. David Fincher had gone on to make some very successful movies, like Seven and Fight Club. I wanted to circle back to Alien 3 and give it another viewing, now that I was in my early 30s, and perhaps more a fan of slow, dark, and drab things. And yeah, I definitely liked it more. By this time, I was the fully formed, crazy adult that I am today, and couldn't be satisfied by simply liking a thing. I had to learn about it, everything about it. And was there ever a lot to learn? I'm going to talk now about how this movie got made. Before I dive into this, though, I want to point you to the version of the movie that I most recommend at this point. Later, I'll touch on the details of the version of the movie that was in theaters in 1992 versus what gets sold as a longer special edition these days, which became available 11 years later in 2003. The version I recommend at this time is actually neither of those, but an unofficial fan edit version of the movie that is called the Legacy Cut. The folks that put this version together worked for 5 years to clean up the visual effects and carefully present a version of the movie that combines the best aspects of both of the more widely available versions. All you need to do to obtain this movie is go to their site at a34k.net, those 4 characters, a34k.net. You enter your email address and they will send you a download link. It isn't a scam, and I can vouch for their integrity. It's free because it's a fan edit. So as long as you own it in its other formats, which of course you do, it is free for you to access. If websites scare you, or if those links stop working, feel free to simply ask me for it, and I will get it to you. ChetAirliner@gmail.com. Or however you get a hold of me if you already know me. All right, now to discuss the journey that this movie took from when it was but a glimmer in the eyes of the studio money piggies to it finally hitting theaters and to where it is today. The history of this production has been covered in excruciating detail in a number of places. I'm going to give a broad summary of it all in the interest of time, omitting most people's names for simplicity's sake. I want to just present this story in a way that will be interesting to folks that are more or less not interested in this sort of thing. But if you are deeply interested, a brief search of YouTube videos for Making of Alien 3 will reveal plenty of content. And to give you an idea of the flavor of most of these videos, here are some of their titles. Alien 3, Morons Incorporated, the hubris of producers. David Fincher's hellish production of Alien 3. Making Alien 3 was a disaster. Production hell, Alien 3. The tragic story behind Alien 3. Behind the chaos of Fincher's first film, and so on. You get the picture. This movie is legendary for how difficult the production was. The universal consensus is that it was entirely the fault of the studio, 20th Century Fox. Even Fox seemed to accept that this was a troubled production, as the making of featurette that comes on the DVDs is called Wreckage and Rage, which, sure, could refer to some plot specifics, but I think it was knowingly and deliberately also relevant to the project as a whole. I think a single sentence can illustrate how utterly doomed this project was from the very start. Alien 3 had a release date before it even had a script. Just let that sink in. Imagine it is your full-time job to work as a higher-up at a movie studio, and you actually make that decision. Absolutely astonishing. An early teaser trailer was released that showed an alien egg that cracks and a bunch of bright light comes out, and the movie trailer voice guy says that
in 1992, we will discover on Earth, everyone can hear you scream.
Now, that would be a clever play on the tagline for the first movie, which would totally be appropriate for this movie if indeed any of it took place on Earth. At all. None of the Alien movies take place on Earth. We don't count AVP. But given that they didn't have a script, they might as well just say something and hope that it either works out in the end or that people just forget. I guess.
What are we doing?
Improvising!
What the studio must have assumed would be a simple matter of getting a script produced proved to be anything but. The plot of the movie underwent top-to-bottom changes 4 or 5 times, while various stages of production started up and stalled. Sets were even constructed for a version of the script that was ultimately not used. This project was hemorrhaging money, and ultimately the film's producers cobbled together a chimeric, hybrid, zombie version of the rejected or abandoned scripts to form the basis for the movie that was ultimately made. And apparently, a basis for a movie was deemed good enough to start filming. 27-year-old David Fincher was brought on to direct the movie after Fox rejected the project that was to be helmed by the previous person selected for the job. Fincher had not directed a feature film before, And the general consensus is that the execs preferred it this way, so they could force him to get their movie made the way they want it and get it done on time, above all else.
It's amazing to me that Fox is the #1 studio in the country because they're all such a bunch of morons.
Little did they realize that Fincher is genuinely good at what he does. He is now widely regarded as one of the more important directors of his generation. A much younger me was very unknowingly grateful for his contributions to humanity in the form of the music videos for Cradle of Love and Vogue. Nothing seemed to get any easier as the movie went into production. The script was not yet finished, and the studio would send along rewrites while the filming was underway, which I'm sure is very destabilizing for a director's vision of the thing that they're in the process of creating. Everything was about deadlines. Fincher's insistence on shooting scenes until they were good was met with heavy pushback. If you know anything about this movie, if you've seen any sort of promotional images about this movie, then you know the iconic moment from the movie. It involves a close-up of the alien and Sigourney Weaver. That is a scene that Fincher reportedly shot himself after being told no by the studio. In the decades that has followed this movie's release, David Fincher has been very tight-lipped about it in public, but he's touched briefly on it here and there. In a 2009 interview with The Guardian, Fincher said, "I had to work on it for 2 years, got fired off it 3 times, and I had to fight for every single thing. No one hated it more than me. To this day, no one hates it more than me." In 2003, the studio released the Alien Quadrilogy box set. This gave audiences an opportunity to see director's cuts of these movies, with the exception of Alien 3, because Fincher declined the offer to be a part of it. What we got instead was titled the Special Edition of the film, more commonly referred to as the Assembly Cut. Assembly cut is an industry term that refers to the first rough edit of a film, where the editor stitches together all the usable footage in roughly chronological order, more or less matching the script. This process was overseen by a producer, and it is the version that most fans of the movie prefer, myself included, with the caveat I mentioned previously about the fan edit that came out this year. The Assembly Cut adds a whopping 30 minutes of runtime to the theatrical version, an addition that markedly improves the film, but also pangs us with what this could have been. I want to be clear. I don't think that any of the crazy drama I just described makes this a better movie. Quite the opposite. It destroyed what this movie could have been. An interesting backstory does not a good movie make. I like this movie because I like this movie. It is good, for many reasons. The crazy history just adds an element of interest to something that I already enjoy. And why, specifically, do I enjoy this anyway? For me, this movie's strengths are in the atmosphere, the visuals, the story, and the performances. Aliens was a good sequel to the first movie. It was different in almost every way. No one was going to outdo that movie in terms of its action movie intensity. Unfortunately, no one has yet tried. There's plenty of action movies in the world, just watch one of those. Or play one of the numerous Aliens video games if you need more bullets and splatters. Just don't play Alien Isolation if you want a gore fest, as it is much more akin to the first and third movie, relying on story and atmosphere instead of pew-pew-pews. Alien Isolation is an excellent game, with a good enough story that it got a novelization that is itself worth a read. Anyway, the aesthetics of Alien 3 appeal to me. The range of the color palette is narrow. It's very brown, very orange. This suits the setting and adds to how drab and hopeless life is on this planet. The set design is very impressive and very immersive. This movie was made before CGI was a thing that most movies could afford. CGI was only used for the airborne debris in some of the exterior shots, a couple shadows, and the crackling of the alien head towards the end of the movie. That's it. The alien effects were all either a guy in a suit a full-sized animatronic or a 1/3 scale rod puppet that required multiple operators. This shit was done by hand, and that is cool. Despite various shortcomings of the script itself, the movie is largely carried by the performances of the actors. There are solid showings by some strong actors that absolutely have stood the test of time. Some of the inmates are more forgettable than others. Some are outright anonymous. They all more or less look the same and speak the same, so the ones that stand out are that much more memorable. In the longer cuts of the movie, some of these folks get considerably more screen time and have much better character arcs. The music is superb, as effective as the music in the first movie, I feel, but with a very different flavor. It both captures and contrasts the atmosphere of this movie. I've got no notes. It is at times lush and rich, other times bleak, and the human choir singing parts reflects the religious themes of the movie perfectly. I think if they'd gone for a colder, sparser electronic score, similar to what Fincher did with Fight Club, this movie would have felt very different. This movie is tragic. It starts and ends with a total gut punch. We humans, especially Americans, all currently live in a world that is being ripped apart by blind greed, wrapped in a flag, toting a Bible. Future generations are being sacrificed at the altar of present-day stock prices, and you don't benefit from that. The top 1% in America own 50% of the stock market wealth, and a full 87% of all stock market value is concentrated into the tiny, filthy hands of the top 10%. The arrogance and avarice of humanity is a cancer upon this planet, and our clearly demonstrated inability to care enough about the future all but guarantees it will continue to fester and ultimately consume us entirely. The destiny of this planet is one of such unnecessary pain and suffering, a tragic reality only exceeded by the scope of the opportunities we should have already taken. And yet, we shouldn't give up. We need to fight. We need to believe that a better world is possible and never stop reaching for it. No one is coming to save us. No one is going to deliver us as passengers into a better tomorrow. We all need to do the best we can with what we have, even if what we have is woefully inadequate and the forces we are fighting are devastatingly powerful, like in Alien 3. And, like in Alien 3, you might not have a happy ending. But you can go out knowing you fought to the very end. You didn't compromise, and you didn't cheat. You can inspire others to do the same. Indeed, if more of us had, I'd probably be saying something different right now. See y'all soon.